Joining us now to talk about that from the Michigan Retailers Association is their Director of Government Affairs, Amy Drumm. Amy, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me again.
How are you? How have you been?
Doing well. It's nice to be back. I'm in my office, which feels good, and I think we're moving in a good direction. So that's exciting.
Yes, definitely. We're talking to you under a lot better circumstances than the first time we talked to you. You're back in the office. How long have you been back in the office?
It's been a couple weeks now. Still doing a little bit from home, but mostly able to be here and be distant from my coworkers. So it's a good, safe environment, and we're wearing masks. We're in public, in the kitchen or in the hallways, and it seems to be going really well.
And it's always good to have some return to normalcy in any way that you can get it, especially in the times that we're in right now. So, in terms of the retail businesses, the state of the retail businesses in the state of Michigan, how are they doing right now? A lot of them have been reopened for several weeks or for a couple of months at this point in full capacity. And of course, they've been doing curbside, they've been doing delivery throughout the course of the pandemic. How are our retailers in the state of Michigan holding up at this point in time?
It's been a lot of change for retail. We're very glad that we're now back to a point where all of their doors are open and you can have customers come in and shop like they're used to. We do have those different accommodations. You have more curbside shopping, more online shopping, more different ways of experiencing the store than people were used to in the past. But the new issue obviously is the mask piece and the added complexity for retail workers to try to enforce that at stores. And so they're concerned about that. I mean, I think we had gone a few weeks without any bad news, which was really refreshing for them. And now we're back to a point where they have concerns about how to handle this and customers who are unhappy about it on either side of the issue.
And with that in mind, what are the retailers doing to put the enforcement of this rule in place? I mean, I saw yesterday. I just happened to go to one of the local grocery stores in the area after I left the office here yesterday, and they had one door open. They usually have two entrances. They had one entrance open that at both of their sub entrances after you enter, they have someone standing at the door to make sure you're wearing a mask. And that may not be the case at every single retailer where will have someone that they can put dedicated at that front door. So how are they adjusting to this? Are they able to adjust to it? Or is it going to be a struggle for them initially to get the ball rolling on this?
So it's definitely going to be a challenge. A lot of people don't have a typical greeter at the door. So this is a new effort to put somebody by the door. We've talked to the state and they said that you don't necessarily have to have somebody standing right at the door if you have an employee who's nearby and can monitor it and, approach somebody or just gently remind them when they walk in that they need to put a mask on. But retailers feel their goal here and their main effort is to clearly communicate what the rules are to customers. They do that by putting up signs and by offering those gentle reminders that this is a requirement, you must do this to enter. But they're not going to put themselves in harm's way of actually trying to confront somebody or physically stop somebody from entering. At that point, they will get law enforcement involved if they need to. But we're hoping we will see very few of those incidents. That's the goal.
Yeah, ideally, we're all hoping that most people will have cooler heads prevail and not outwardly obstruct the regular business of any retailer or any other business, frankly, in the local area, as they're just trying to follow the rules and keep their business going. But in that case, it does present a little bit of a dilemma from a business standpoint. We've talked with this with different chambers of commerce and different other businesses in the local area as well, that you want to enforce these laws, A, because it's the law and your business can be put in jeopardy by not following it, but also you also have the other side where you don't want to be denying business, especially in the time where it is so critical to have new customers coming in, repeat customers coming in. How are our retailers able to or going about balancing that and working with local police departments maybe on enforcement so that they're able to continue to bring these people in as consumers to their business and not sacrificing that?
Absolutely. And the other point too, I think that wasn't mentioned is retailers want to make sure their employees are safe. So we hope that people will follow the rules and wear masks. We do think that's an important piece of this puzzle to keep retail doors open. If we follow the safeguards, we can all continue to shop safely. But in terms of enforcing the actual requirement that's under this new executive order, we do have retailers who've reached out to their local police partners and law enforcement partners to make sure that they're aware of what they expect from them. when should they call, what kind of response will they get. And we've been really pleased, I think, so far in terms of the response we've gotten from law enforcement of they absolutely want to support retail workers and keep them safe. They don't want them getting into a dangerous situation. And they've already been deployed out to stores in a couple instances to kind of keep that peace as best they can and handle these situations. So we're hoping it'll remain at a level that they can continue to do that and it won't be a burden either on law enforcement or on retailers. But without law enforcement to help back up our retailers, I don't know where we would be. So we're very grateful to all of their efforts.
Amy, I have a retail background, and I know sometimes that profit margin can be very slim. So businesses have already taken a hit. Do you think a lot of them will be able to survive outside of the big box stores if we have a second surge in the fall?
That's a great question. I think it depends on how we react to it. I think we learned a lot from this first few months of COVID and what we can do and what we can't do safely. We haven't seen a ton of outbreaks or really any big outbreaks that have been tied back to a retail store or retail workers, which is really encouraging. We think that retail is a very safe activity, and the state has even put it on the very low tier of risky activities you can engage in. So we're hopeful that if we go back to a point, heaven forbid, where we need to shut things down again, that retail can remain open and all retail doors can, as long as we're following these safeguards we have in place. I think they work. But to your point, the profit margins are very slim for many retailers, and they've had a lot of added costs with the extra cleaning and extra staff they've needed to fulfill online orders and additional safeguards they've had to put in place, monitoring aisles or monitoring the door for capacity and now for masks. That's a lot of cost. And I think what we've seen from our members is that a lot of them are going to try and ride this out as long as they can. They want to remain good members of the community and good members of the economy and contributing. But I think we will see more drop off potentially next year. Once we get past the Christmas season, if they're not able to recoup their numbers and the costs just keep going up, they may not be able to make it.
Amy Drumm with us. She's the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Michigan Retailers Association. A lot of lessons were learned early on in the pandemic, those first couple of weeks, definitely those first couple of months, as businesses were shut down and retailers had to adjust to continue to push commerce out and about in the community without having their doors open. What of those lessons are still currently in play right now, being utilized? How is that benefiting these businesses? And how are those lessons that they learned early on in the pandemic helping to prepare them for the worst case scenario that we go back into a shutdown situation?
So we have absolutely advised all of our members that if they didn't have a robust online presence before, that they should be looking into that very seriously now. We don't know if we're going to be forced to go back into a situation where they're going to have to depend on online sales or curbside sales. So that is a lesson that we've encouraged most to really heed and look forward into working to achieve that goal. And the other is to make sure that they're communicating really clearly with their customers. You can't communicate enough. You want to make sure they understand how and where and what to expect when they come to the store. Where's the curbside parking? Where do I pull up? How do I look at your online items? What are your hours? Have they changed? So we want to make sure people are communicating more and more and more. And then one of the really interesting lessons we heard from a number of retailers was that as there were some supply challenges and panic shopping, pulled things off the shelves in a number of stores, some stores that didn't get a lot of traffic were seeing increases in traffic because they were able to keep their shelves stocked. And so we've seen a shift, I think, in where people were maybe always used to shopping at a certain store and they went to somewhere different because they were able to find the items they were looking for there. So that's benefited some at the cost of others. It's just been an interesting experience, and we've encouraged people to work closely with their wholesalers and their suppliers so that they can try to keep things stocked, and or hopefully we won't go back to a situation with that panic shopping again. Again, it's interesting lessons in terms of communicating and building relationships with local law enforcement and with your suppliers. All of those things are important and should be done going to the future, regardless of whether or not we have an unfortunate situation again like this spring.
So while some businesses were devastated, it seems like other businesses thrived during this. So looking ahead at the retail world, what businesses have kind of come out of this on the other side? Because I like one that comes to mind for me, sign companies. I drive down the road and I see everyone has to have a new sign, right? Talking about your curbside pickup or the hours. So, what businesses do you think are going to boom coming out of this?
Well, from what we've seen so far for retail, it's been all those essential services. So your grocery, your pharmacy, your hardware, clothing is also essential for especially for kids who are growing out of items and need new shoes or new clothes. So I think we'll continue to see those stores and those retailers do well. It's been interesting because we've also seen the boom in more technology. So anybody who's selling computers or any kind of internet connectivity devices, that is certainly doing really well. But as you mentioned, there's more requirements of putting up signs and communicating. So I think the things that we'll see while that aren't retail are those web designers, anybody who's making connectivity and helping to increase the ability to do different kinds of shopping, different experiences that don't involve physically being on site or touching a lot of items. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. And Zoom is certainly a big one too that's doing really well, obviously.
Yeah, I had never heard of Zoom before all of this. So we're all getting an education. And I would think like pajama companies and athletic wear, those types of companies are doing well because we're not dressing up anymore. I mean, my dry cleaning bill went from $200 a week to zero, which is great. So one thing I do have to ask you about though is what is going on with the deposit returns? Can you talk about that at all? Some stores you can do it, some stores you can do it on certain days or they reach a limit. Why is there a delay on returning your deposits?
That's a great question. So the deposit system that we have in Michigan is somewhat complicated. And I think this pandemic has really brought that to light that this maybe isn't the most efficient way we can recycle our bottles and cans. What's happening though at the store level is not all stores are taking things or have always been able to take things back the same way. The stores that have those reverse vending machines where you put the cans back into the container and it reads them through, those are the ones that are required to take back cans and bottles now. And only if they're really in the front of the store or near kind of in a separate room. So they're segregated out and you're not intermixing bottles and cans into the entire store if it's at the back. The problem we're seeing though is there's just a huge volume of cans and bottles out there. And the system doesn't just end with retail. It's not that the bottles and cans go back to retail and retail, deals with it themselves. The distributors pick those containers back up from retail. And so they're part of that process. And they have capacity limits of what they can handle. And so when the retail store hits their capacity in terms of how much they can physically take in and put into the bins that they have to wait for the distributor to come pick those up and empty them and give them empty bins to take back more. So we're seeing some real differences in how that process works. The state has put the allowing retailers to enforce that strict limit of 250 cans a day per person. That was already in statute, but the reason they're enforcing that more strictly now is to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to take things back. There was a concern, you had a lot of those fundraising drives out there that were collecting cans and bottles for good causes, but they would just overwhelm a retail system with the number that they had, and then nobody else would be able to take back their bottles and cans. So we thought the limits in allowing retailers to enforce that would give everybody the same opportunity to return some, and they may have to wait a second or third trip back, but it's better to move some of those out of the system and get us moving forward. But it's going to take a number of months and maybe even a year to fully get through that backlog of cans that are out there, and more keep going out. It's summer and people are enjoying beverages, and it's just a continual process. Now, I will note though, you can recycle them, so you can forgo the deposit and drop them off in your recycling bin or at a recycling center if you don't want to have to wait in the line, and that's much easier.
Amy Drumm with us. She is the Vice President of Government Affairs at the Michigan Retailers Association. Amy, during the summer months especially, retail is one of those business sectors that sees a lot of new staff come on, especially part-time staff, to help shoulder the load of greater business and more foot traffic into the stores. Even during the pandemic, staffing is still a major issue for a lot of companies as they've had layoffs over the course of the pandemic and people maybe aren't coming back, or they're really struggling to find new talent to come in that's eager to go back to work Is that something that our retailers in the state of Michigan, especially in southeastern Michigan, in our local area, are struggling with right now, or is staffing something that they have maybe under control?
Staffing has been a challenge since the start of COVID. It's certainly, we saw a number of people who would normally go into work and be able to work a full shift that had to stay home with their kids or if they were sick. And so they had a lot of turnover, even at the stores that were open the entire time. And as people were trying to come back, you had the same challenges of people who weren't ready to come back, or people who, no longer could work or chose not to work anymore. So we are still seeing that. There typically are a lot of retail openings. So if you're looking for a job, retail is a great place to look for an opportunity. But it's definitely seen a lot of turnover, which is, again, complicated by the fact that there's so many new rules and requirements that follow. It's a lot to get somebody up to speed on.
Elaborate on that, because there are more regulations in place. There are more rules in place that are different from the typical retail situation. How much training do people have to undergo? How much orientation do people have to undergo once they do get those retail jobs before they're allowed to start?
So it depends on the store, and it depends on how much retail experience you're coming in with. If you've worked in another store and you've got a lot of experience, you may not have a whole lot of training to go through other than the COVID-specific requirements of these are our cleaning methods and these are our policies and procedures to keep the employees safe and customers safe. But there's definitely, every week or every couple weeks we're having new rules come out. So that does require more training. So it's an ongoing effort. It's not necessarily just the initial training when you come in, because we've seen so many changes. They've had to continually communicate that with their employees and get them to buy into the retailer's plan to keep everybody safe.
Amy, by and large right now, what are, in terms of staffing, what are retailers looking for in terms of their staffers?
I think it's across the board. I haven't heard specific needs from our retail members, but I know that there are a lot of opportunities out there in all the different positions. So if you're looking to be an entry-level employee, if you're a high school student and just looking to get into the job market, there's definitely opportunities for you. If you were looking for a higher level position and you have experience, I'm sure that we have retailers who are looking for those folks as well. Just look around, look on those job sites. A lot of them have posted things there, and I'd have to get back to you on more specifics, but I think it's good news that we haven't heard a real drop off or need. I know that they definitely have positions open and available, but I don't know that we've had a huge problem in having them fill them. It's just kind of a rotating door of people coming in and out and lots of turnover, which isn't different for retail. There's a lot of turnover in general because people often use this as their first job and they learn experience and move on.
Are you seeing that some of the retail outlets are going part-time or, 32 hours a week rather than bringing on full-time employees?
So with the reduced hours, there's certainly some changes in what we're seeing at the retail stores. They're required to reduce their hours in some effort to do more cleaning. And that depends on whether the employees are doing the cleaning or if they're having another firm come in to do the cleaning in the evenings. But there are more reduced hours across the board in retail as required by some of these executive orders. So there definitely are changes on that front. But on the other side of that, there's more opportunity, I think, to pick up hours for other employees. So while the store may have fewer hours that they're open, I think you have more opportunity to fill the hours you wish to work at a retail store.
Amy, anything else you'd like to touch on, or anything else that's important for us to know about before we let you go today?
Just like to stress again that, we really want people to do the right thing and wear a mask to help protect retail employees. Please remember to be kind to them and that they are not the ones that have put this policy in place. They're just trying to enforce it the best they can. And if you can wear a mask, you will save them a lot of stress and worry when you go into the store. And we just want to make sure we can keep retail doors open. So if you need to follow these safeguards, please just do that. It's much easier to wear a mask than to shut things back down for a few more months and be stuck at home.
Well, Amy, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. Amy Drumm with us, the Vice President of Government Affairs of the Michigan Retailers Association, with us on the Oakland County Megacast.